All right, what's up, guys? We are back with another episode, and this week we have basically one big main topic along with some very small news, but the main topic this week is Selkirk just absolutely roasted UPA into oblivion.
Things are getting spicy.
And man. I did not know that Selkirk had that in them.
Dude, it's crazy. But, I like it, though.
Yeah, it was wild. We're going to get to it. We got some news we want to get through first, but that is going to be the main topic this week because it was rough.
Yeah, we'll try to make the news quick because we got some fun things to talk about.
For sure. All right. First thing I want to talk about, guys, is we've now created a clips channel for the podcast. So basically, that channel is going to be called Pickleball Studio Clips, and basically it will just be clips from this podcast of the main topic or whatever the most entertaining topic was. So if you don't have time to digest the entire podcast, we try and put the notes in there, but we realize not everyone may check those out. So if you want to, go subscribe to that channel. It'll be down in the podcast. Those clips will go up live with the podcast every single week. Yeah. So this week, I'm sure it will be the piece of Selkirk news, but
more than likely.
Yeah. If you want to check it out, go check that out. Second, I just want to talk about really quick. Melon did release a new hat. No, this is not sponsored. I bought this hat with my own money. But some people have told me in the past that they think the Melon hats are too heavy, which I've personally never noticed. I mean, I guess I haven't worn those really thin runner hats that some people like wear. Like Patrick wears that really, really thin runner hat Melon.
Yeah, there's an older Melon that's similar. It's like that really thin, like you can just crumple it down material hat.
Yeah.
And if you're used to something like that, then yeah, Melons will feel a little bit heavier just because they're really thick material.
Yep.
But yeah, the new Melons, they look great.
Yeah.
How are you liking it so far?
Yeah, so far, I mean, it's definitely lighter than the other Melon, but the weight and breathability never bothered me to begin with.
Sure.
So like, I'm sure I'm going to use this for pickleball because it is lighter, but like I could use the other ones and it wouldn't bother me. So
yeah,
if you were someone who really wanted a lighter version of a Melon, they now make them.
Yeah.
And I think it's like 4 different colors or something like that. So if you want to, check it out. Also, a bunch of you have been asking me about when my discount code is coming back.
Yeah.
And it will be coming back. I am figuring out those details, but we'll talk about that more later. So it is coming back probably within the next couple weeks.
Nice.
And that I'm sure will only be 24 hours again. So just be prepared. All right. Also, podcast episode 100 is coming up. Thanks for some of you who gave us some ideas. If you have more ideas for that episode, leave them down below. We would love to have the ideas. Will is actually going to come into town so we can do the pod in person with all three of us.
Yeah.
And right now we have some pretty big stuff planned. And all I'm going to say for right now is if you can wait until like mid-September to buy a paddle, I would highly recommend you wait till mid-September to purchase a paddle.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say right now, but we got some big stuff coming for that podcast episode.
You're going to want to be tuned in for that one.
Yeah, you're definitely going to want to see episode 100. All right. Anyways, moving on. There was a couple tennis things this week. Andre Agassi signs with Joola, which I don't even know how that works because he's like part owner of Komodo and
Owl.
And I swear he's an investor of Owl.
Yep.
So it's just kind of weird.
He's got his hands in everything over here.
Like,
Duper, Owl, Komodo. Bro doesn't know what he wants.
He's like, give me a little piece of that, every single part of the pie.
Seriously, I don't understand it fully.
He just seems to be in all the companies. But I thought it was interesting that he signed with Joola, and then Novak Djokovic also played pickleball this week. There was like a head event. Callie Jo Smith was there. Sinner, another tennis player, was there.
Yeah.
It didn't look like they played any serious pickleball. It looked like they were kind of just playing some kitchen games
and hitting some hands battles and stuff.
Yeah, but their reaction, you could see the enjoyment of it.
They definitely seemed like they enjoyed it. I'm kind of upset that it was done in a really janky warehouse on bare concrete, taped, and you couldn't even get like a real net. Really? Come on.
Yeah.
So I was a little bummed out with how it was set up.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's cool to see him hit. You can tell that, like, obviously they're going to have good hand-eye coordination, but they definitely look a little like a fish out of water.
Yeah,
not natural
to
them.
I would love, absolutely, like, I would probably pay money to go to an event if it was, let's just say Ben and Colin versus like Carlos and Novak or something.
Dude.
Like, I'd pay money to go watch that.
I'm a little upset that Callie you could tell she was being really nice.
Well, okay, but I'm sure she was told to.
I'm sure she was, but if I was in her position and I was told to be nice, I would have said, nah, these people are ragging on pickleball. I'm going to show them what's up, and I'm going to bag them.
Novak didn't even rag on it. He literally said pickleball's the reason tennis is dying.
He said that after. There was a interview he did before that where he said, not negative things with pickleball, I'm pretty sure, but it wasn't overly positive either. So
well, yeah, if you're like one of the top people in your sport, you're probably not going to be like, yeah, let's go over and play this, guys.
Obviously, but I still feel like all these tennis snobs need to be showing us up. They think they're so good.
I would have loved to see Callie go all out too, but without playing a real match, that wasn't going to happen. Like, she's not going to be like playing a dink game and then just body bag him or something.
Would have been funny though.
It would have been funny.
At least one clip.
One speed up would have been funny.
Yeah,
I agree. But yeah, I don't know. It's kind of fun to see more of the tennis players at least enjoying it and not just like showing them being like, oh, this is trash. Like,
yeah.
I mean, in the last year and a half, maybe 2 years, like, I don't think I ever would have imagined Novak even picking up a pickleball paddle or Carlos. So I think it's cool that it's even happening.
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, it's only a good thing for pickleball. Although I've heard that anytime a pro tennis player mentions or does anything with pickleball, they get so much hate from their fans.
Oh yeah, I'm sure they do. I'm sure the tennis purists absolutely hate it.
So dumb.
Yeah,
it's
for
like
sure.
If you're an amateur tennis player and one of the best in the world is playing pickleball, just accept it.
I will say though, I don't think I said this on the last podcast episode, but I thought it this week. So when we went and played tennis, our tennis court has 4 pickleball courts that can be on it. It's double lined or whatever. Yep. And it made it so hard for me to see like the doubles alley and not hit. Like, I kept thinking that because of where some of the pickleball lines were, I kept thinking that was part of the regular line, so I kept hitting it out.
Yep.
So I can understand how these tennis players would be frustrated with the pickleball lines on their court, because it just makes your game harder to play. So if you don't have any interest in pickleball, like, imagine if basketball lines were suddenly on our pickleball courts, we'd be mad too.
Yeah. Totally.
Like, so I totally get it.
That is completely reasonable. Like, I totally understand if you have to share surface and have lines everywhere. Yeah. That's just upsetting for everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't like playing pickleball on tennis courts either.
Yeah.
So that one I can totally understand.
Totally. All right. So there was some interesting news this week that I don't have much more to say on it, but it seems like Onix owns a patent on thermoforming. Now, people in my Discord were discussing this, and it seems like the way they describe the patent is slightly different from how most manufacturers do thermoforming. So I think the way they described it was like they thermoform it and then put the face on, where at least to my knowledge, most thermoform pickleball paddles right now have the face, like the raw carbon face on it, the seam put around, and then it's like all molded together. So I don't know how they're doing the face second. But it seems like they own a patent, so I'm very curious to see how that impacts the industry. I didn't get to read all the documents, but it seemed like they potentially had some kind of lawsuit with Pickle as well, and I don't know if they lost, but I know looking at the owner's LinkedIn bio, it seemed like they're just not, it seems like he's moved on.
Wow.
So I don't know if that's all a direct cause of Onix. I would think it probably is, but
yeah,
very curious if that impacts the rest of the industry.
To clarify, not Gabe Tardio Pickle, PCKL Pickle.
Yeah, I probably should. Yeah, I forget. I always got to spell it.
There's way too many. Not
the OG
P-I-K-K-O.
Pickle that I'm aware of. Yes. PCKL.
Yep.
So we'll see if they go after anyone else. But I just thought that was interesting because what company doesn't have a thermoform paddle besides like the USA made brands like Engage and Paddle Tech?
I think basically, outside of them and like Revlon, pretty much
everyone. Like if you're just
Gearbox,
if you're a USA made brand. Yeah, Gearbox. I guess it depends. Yeah,
how you look at it. Yeah,
right.
Basically, every company has.
This entire wall is like thermoform paddles for the most part.
Almost everything on here is thermoformed.
So yeah, I don't know. That would be wild. I don't know what that would mean for the whole industry, but hopefully nothing bad, because that would be crazy if Onix was the only one.
It would be the ultimate paddle company purge.
Seriously.
Every paddle company needs to like come up, like get rid of all their paddles and come up with something new. Could you imagine?
That would be insane.
That would be nuts. And
But
man,
I guess if the whole industry had to do it, we'd probably come up with something pretty quick.
of all companies to have a patent on thermoforming, why would it have to be one of the worst?
Yeah, the company that's done nothing.
Absolutely nothing.
Their
Like,
ball isn't relevant anymore. Their paddles haven't been relevant in forever. Though I think they did just release. I think I also saw on Discord that they released a new super thick paddle. It's like 22 millimeter. It looks like it's supposed to be a cheaper Lux without a hole.
Bro, what the heck?
I know, 22 mil. I was like, that's crazy.
That's nuts.
Let's just
Dang.
go up to like 25
They
or
go
something.
the ultimate extremes. They go, we want the thickest paddle, and they also have one of the thinnest with that Onix.
10, I think.
Yeah,
10 or 11.
10
Yeah.
sheet of paper, man.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So we'll see what comes of that. Next up, the Joola 3S is now up for pre-order.
Yes.
Definitely curious to get one of these and cut it open. You already know the day I get one,
That thing's
I am
getting
cutting that
sliced.
open. I have heard so many mixed things about this. I have had people text me and say, I just played against one of those and literally could not win a hands battle against the thing.
Yep.
I've heard other people say they feel like it's a bit toned down or it's not as hot. I don't know. Until we get one, no one's going to know what to believe.
Yeah, I've heard mixed things as well.
I mean, I got to hit one, and in Kansas when I got to mess with it, it did feel toned down from my mod, but it was still a hot paddle. Like it still made that deep thunk noise. It was still fast, but I just don't know.
More than a typical thermoform paddle.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
I don't know, if I had to hit it against like a paddle tech, was it hotter than that?
If we're going gearbox and mod, the top.
Yeah.
Step down is paddle tech.
Yep.
Where's the 3S?
Well, that's why I need to like hit it side by side with something. I feel like it may have still been above the paddle tech. Like I remember thinking, yeah, this is still pretty hot, but then I would pick up my mod and I was like, okay, I have to like baby this a little bit more.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know if some people's perception of that is because maybe the one they played against, the core is breaking down, and because the ones I hit were brand new.
Yeah. It's true. Like, I mean, some they can break immediately. I mean, we already know somebody here locally who hit with a mod and that thing core crushed immediately, which shocker. It's no different.
Right.
So I honestly don't think the 3S will be any different. I think.
Do you think it's going to be the same internal?
No. Not internal. Sorry. I should have clarified. It'll be no different in terms of core crushing and structural integrity.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm curious to see what changed on the inside. Is it just less foam? What is it? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited to see the inside of that thing. But yeah, I've heard so many mixed thoughts on it where some people say, oh my gosh, I love this thing and it hits super hard, but not as hard as a mod. Some people say it's not that crazy. So I don't know. We'll have to just get them and see.
Yeah. I am curious though, for you guys listening, do you plan to buy one of these? Do you care that it's not USAP approved? Like, if someone shows up with a UPA approved only paddle, which this is the only one right now, do you care? Like, I'm just curious how this is going to impact the industry and where people are going to sit with it.
Yeah, how are people going to react to this? Because, like, obviously the Vice was, approved nowhere, and most people don't want to play against a Vice.
Yeah.
Are you and your friend groups going to be like, yeah, no UPA around here, or are you just going to go with it?
Yeah, I feel like I don't know what's going to happen. I feel like there will be probably, depending on what paddles get released, right? Like, all of this hinges on how hot the paddle is.
Yeah.
If the paddle was like gearbox hot, then I think you'd probably have a lot of rec groups going, yeah, I don't want this thing.
Right. But
if it is toned down, then like no one's going to, if it's in line with a paddle tech, no one's going to care.
Yeah, no one's going to care. Now, not to get into it too early, but one quick question is, if the PPA fully switches over to UPA, cuts out USAP approval, like no USAP approval paddles. Currently, the pros can use UPA or USAP.
Yeah.
But the amateurs are still under USAP only rules. Yeah. Do you think the PPA will ever switch over to only UPA paddles?
Well, they've kind of hinted that pros? 2025, they want to certify all the pro paddles.
Yep.
And then in 2026, they made it sound like they want to or are heavily considering doing the amateurs by that point, only, depending on how the pros. So here's my thing. They definitely want that.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And we're going to get into why. But like, it would be a cash cow if the money stays the same.
100%.
So, yeah, I think
what I think will be weird is, imagine they cut out USAP paddle approval for all play. But then the pros play different rules, serve rules, and this rule and that rule, but the amateurs will still play under USAP play rules?
Yeah. I mean,
So
will they eventually just make their own rules?
Make
all
their
around?
own rules for amateurs too that they got to get used to, or are they just going to leave it and just be like whatever? So that'll be interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm definitely curious. Did you catch much of the PPA this weekend? I only had one match I really wanted to talk about, but
yeah, honestly, very little. I watched highlights of the finals and I watched most of the semis. So
sure.
I watched the important matches that I was interested in. Otherwise, all the other ones I was kind of disinterested.
Yeah, I watched some on Sunday. I got to catch the full mixed final. Did you watch that one or no?
I didn't get a chance.
Dude, wild.
Yeah.
James and Anna got clean swept.
Oh, it was clean swept?
0-3 for them.
Woo!
Yeah,
Oh,
Jesse and Tardio, 3-0.
Dude, that's crazy.
I believe they were all close. I think it was 12-10, 11-9, and then possibly in another 11-9, or I'm pretty sure that last one was kind of close too. But it was wild. James did not look good.
No?
Like he not good as a player, but he looked sick.
Oh, really?
Like
he looked fine in men's.
Yeah, I have no idea. Like his body language was really off. He just looked really tired. Like
weird.
I don't know. Everything about his play just looked really off. So I don't know what was going on there, but it just seemed like he was not all there.
Shoot.
And Jessie also just looked like she was playing out of her mind.
Playing really well. Did you see memes of Pickleball?
Oh, of course I did.
Okay. Certain somebody saying that Jesse is a little overrated.
The timing of that clip was really
the
funny.
timing's way too good. If you don't know what we're talking about, just go to memes of Pickleball.
Yeah,
and you'll know.
I think last week on the KOTC podcast, Jimmy said something along the lines of like, Jesse's really overrated.
They were like, giving their opinions on certain players.
Which, to be fair, if I had to rate, I also would not have had Jesse on my card winning.
That one, I don't want to say like he was kind of harsh, like extremely overrated.
Sure.
But to be fair, her recent performance at MLP and other places has not been great.
Yeah. So like
it's understandable.
It wasn't even unreasonable, but it was just like, of all the times to say that, and then she goes and wins it cold was just so funny.
And then, but not only just with Jesse Irving saying, oh yeah, Andre Dascu too. He's just really overrated.
Oh, I didn't see that one.
Oh yeah, he said Andre Dascu is also extremely overrated in his opinion. And then Andre just absolutely destroying people out here. I mean, come on.
That's hilarious.
Every pro's going to be wanting to be called overrated.
Did Andre play with Gabe again?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Okay, so Gabe is clearly the secret
Gabe's the secret sauce with everybody. Dude, everyone wins with Gabe. Fed, Jesse, Andre, like, geez, it's crazy. He's a beast.
I mean, yeah, he was, the amount of court he was playing in the mixed final was crazy. He was just, you could not keep the ball away from him.
No.
It was insane.
He's so fast.
But Jesse did actually play really good. Like, that was probably some of the best I've seen Jesse play in a long time. So,
that too.
But yeah, that's the only real match that I caught this week. Just thought that was a pretty good one. And then I really think that pros should get a fine for throwing their paddles.
Yeah.
It looks so unprofessional, in my opinion, for pros to constantly be throwing their paddles.
I mean, tennis players get fined for racket abuse.
Right. So I just think, because DJ Young got that one where he threw, bounced, and hit the crowd or whatever. That one was bad.
That one was intense.
Yeah, I mean, that one was bad. But I just think you have to draw the line at, like, you throw your paddle, fine. Or maybe it's like a warning and then like a fine and then blah, blah, blah. I don't know exactly.
I definitely think there needs to be like a warning first, unless it's like extremely severe of a throw. Like if you, I don't know, chuck it out of the court or it hits somebody.
Yep.
Like there definitely needs to be better lines about it. But I agree. Like I definitely think that there should be something in place because we've had a lot recently.
Yeah, it just feels like every PPA, someone's throwing their paddle.
The women's singles final last week, Hayden this week.
Yep.
Was there any others this week?
Not that I saw, but I'm sure there were.
I'm sure there probably was.
On like another court or something. But I just feel like I don't know. It doesn't feel like a great look. It just, I don't know. It's not great. And if you want to eat the fine after you throw the paddle, fine.
Yeah, that's
but at least
great.
you got a fine for it.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I mean,
fine people like $1,500, $2,000 probably make you think twice about throwing your paddle.
Yeah.
And now look, I'm not saying I've never thrown a paddle. I've thrown my paddle when I'm mad. But I'm also don't think it was a good thing for me to do.
Yeah, I mean, we've all been there. I don't blame them. I mean, think about it's high stakes. There's a lot on the line for these players. Like, there's a lot of emotions. I think it's good to see emotion out of them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there does need to be like a penalty for it.
Yeah.
Unless because then it's just going to be all the time.
Yeah. I don't think it's great.
I mean, we saw Carlos Alcaraz smash paddle or racket recently.
Oh, really? I didn't see that. I can't even imagine him smashing a racket.
Dude, I know. Even the announcers were like, this is unusual for him.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It was, I'll show you later. It was legendary. I mean, he just went to town on that thing.
I will have to go look that up. That's like hard to imagine.
I know, right? So it's, and actually, I mean, I'll get into it a little bit. Similar reasons, the PPA last week, I heard that they didn't, some of the courts that were there at that facility had no sand put in the surface.
Yeah.
So it was absurdly slick and kind of dangerous. And I think it was a similar thing with Alcaraz. The court was like too slick. It was either too slick or like too gritty, and he was having issues with the ball, so that's why he got mad and smashed his
So
racket.
did he lose and smash it, or
he lost a point, and then I think he was losing points,
I see.
and then he just went berserk.
Crazy.
So it happens tennis, happens pickleball, but I think there should be a penalty for it.
Crazy.
Maybe it's a loss of point if it's during the match.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think like warning, loss of point, and then like continues on to
fines.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to the main topic here.
Woo. All right, here we go.
Like I said, Selkirk just went to absolute town. I like reading this thing. So here's the deal. When the Joola 3S got announced at that Kansas PPA we went to, when I was at the venue, would they have really sent it this quick? I don't know, but I feel like I was around the venue. I would just like hear things like, oh man, Selkirk's like not happy right now about like this paddle getting approved. I don't know if an email was sent over that weekend or what, but I just remember hearing something.
Yep.
And then I've heard murmurs about like this Selkirk email throughout the industry, and I'm like, what is it?
Yeah.
Like, how bad was it? All I just kept hearing was it was bad. And then when this thing finally came out and I got to read it, and it's not posted publicly anywhere, someone just like linked it in my Discord with a download. And maybe we'll have that link down below if we're able to.
Yeah.
Pickleball Tech Dude, I'll try and leave his video link down below. He also did a recap of it, so you can also check that if you want, because we're not going to cover the entire thing. It's so big, and there's 2 of them.
The second I opened even the first email and I saw that how many pages it was, I was huge. Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, it took me a while to read through this thing, and like I'd be going backwards and I'm like, oh my gosh, did they really write that? I'm like, that's crazy.
Dude, I know.
So anyways, that's kind of how this began, and these emails were sent out, to my understanding, was to the paddle committee for UPA-A, so that's all the different brands like Vulcan, Selkirk, Sig Zero, Ace, Franklin, whoever else is on the board. It was sent to all those people, basically, kind of recapping, and it was complaints about UPA, PPL, and all those things. So there's 3 main concerns, and they outlined this in their letter. So the first one is the continued and unaddressed incompetence and unprofessionalism of the PPL and the unwillingness to bring in engineers instead of salesman friends to oversee testing.
Yes.
Then the second one was the uncouth and biased way of collaborating with a single manufacturer behind closed doors to push through an interim certification because they were in a tight spot with USAP and needed help getting their paddles approved. And the overall structure and direction of UPA-A that has the potential to create anti-competitive and anti-consumer behaviors and outcomes. And then the third one was the unthoughtful interim certification, which was not sent out for feedback from manufacturers before being implemented and has the potential to allow harmful paddles that are Gen 3 paddles on steroids.
That was a lot.
So that last one is really interesting. That they say harmful paddles that are Gen 3 paddles on steroids. And I think I know partially why he said that, and we'll get to that. He might be referring to spin, but I'm like, we haven't even seen this thing yet. Like, we don't even know if it's actually hotter or what, more spin or whatever. So I thought that part of that was like, okay, like maybe now you're pushing it a little bit. Yeah. So anyways, that is the main points they had. And the first thing we're going to go into is PPL. So PPL is Pro Pickle Labs. Yep. Since the inception of this lab, which I think was sometime last year for MLP, basically they do, at the time it was MLP paddle testing only. Now it's PPA and MLP paddle testing. Yep. I have never once heard from one manufacturer, and I've talked to quite a few, one of them that actually likes PPL testing or thinks they do a good job. Every single time, pretty much how it gets summarized to me is exactly what they say in this. Like, incompetent, the testing is bad, we don't even know how the testing works, the testing is inconsistent, yada, yada, yada.
I remember the first time, like, I remember seeing them or hearing about it was last year, MLP Daytona. I was down there actually working. I was on the broadcast crew. And I remember going upstairs where they were doing the testing, and they had this small room. And dude, it was like a lockdown fortress. They wouldn't let any players, any people. If you weren't PPL people, you were not allowed in that room. Like, it was very secretive. Like, no one knew anything about it. And I mean, now that we know a little bit more about what's going on, it's just so messed up. Yeah,
it's pretty messy. So the dislike for PPL across many manufacturers, not just Selkirk, has been strong. Like, I've heard about this for at least a year now.
No one likes them.
And I also heard, I hear different things about this, and I'm sure PPA would claim different, but I've heard from numerous manufacturers that they were not able to get testing, like how the testing works, so they could build their paddles for it. Because
around it.
One of the problems this entire time is that the way PPL tests for paddles is different from PPA.
Well, they say we have different and better standards than USAP. So they're open about telling them that it is different than what they're currently making paddles to be suited for. And then when they fail, they don't tell them why they fail.
Yeah, I've heard, I don't know that for sure, but I have heard from a couple manufacturers that, like, when a paddle failed, they couldn't get information. Like, what failed?
Yeah,
was it deflection? Was it grip? Was it?
No one, they just wouldn't say.
Yeah, so that part I can't confirm, but I have heard that.
I don't even understand why. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, I don't know.
It makes no sense.
I don't know why you'd want to be secretive about that. That doesn't make a lot of sense. But yeah, I've heard complaints about PPL for a while, and here's the main problem with it. If manufacturers, and like, so we'll rewind a little bit. Okay, so first, people always, there's been these images floating around the internet, stacks of paddles from all sorts of different companies, or memes about players bringing 20 paddles to try and get one that approves or passes. Here's the problem with all of this. If you're a manufacturer, you build your paddles for USAP certification until the last couple months where UPA became a thing and that certification was possibly going to be a thing. Like, let's rewind 6 months, 7 months, 8 months. You build your paddles for USAP test, which is different than PPL. So if you don't even know how the PPL tests work and how to build around it, and the only company you're getting certified by is USAP, it's not really fair that your paddles are failing over here. You can't build it right.
Exactly. And then all of a sudden your pros are saying all my paddles failing, they're getting mad at you, then everyone's getting mad.
Well, and then people online are like, oh, hey, look, like, this brand fails all the time. And it's like, okay, yes, but it wasn't built to pass that test.
Exactly. And then they just don't even know why, so they can't even write what isn't even necessarily wrong.
Right.
You know, so it's like, hands are tied. What do you want me to do? Like, we can't change how we make the paddles like that. You know?
Right. So that's been a problem I've heard over the last year. And just to, like, clarify how some of it works. So USAP's deflection test, they press into a paddle. I believe it should be the center of the paddle. I'm actually not 100% sure on that. But anyways,
it is. They
press into the face of the paddle, and it's somewhere between 6 and 12 pounds that gets pressed into the paddle, and it's only allowed to deflect a certain amount. So 6 to 12 pounds, not that much weight. Okay. PPL, on the other hand, how they do it is they have something what they call ADF, which I believe stands for acceptable deflection force, I think is what it is. And how theirs works is they keep loading weight into the paddle, like, just keeps increasing the poundage until the paddle deflects a certain amount. So their fail number is, if it's less than 42 pounds of force to make the paddle deflect, then it fails. So the lower the amount of pounds pressed into the face to make it deflect, that would, in theory, mean the paddle's hotter, right? Like, if it only takes me a pound of force to deflect whatever their number is, obviously 1 pound of force is not very much. Versus if I need, I'm going to make up a number here, no paddle needs this much to my knowledge, but if it takes 300 pounds of force to deflect, I'm going to make up another number here, half an inch. That's clearly much more than 1 pound. So 42 is what it takes. I don't know exactly where all the paddles sit, but clearly a lot of them fail. But that's a lot more weight than USAP's 6 to 12 pounds. And it's clear that USAP's 6 to 12 pounds probably was not adequate and was probably not catching paddles.
They're also measuring different metrics, right? I mean, one's going to failure and the other one's measuring...
Well, depends how you want to define failure. I guess like USAP defines that if, what do I have it in here listed as? Actually, I don't have it, but I think it's like 0.005 of an inch. If it deflects more than that, it fails with that 6 to 12 pounds. PPL, they just keep pressing weight, and if it is below a certain weight, then it fails.
Yeah.
Because that means it didn't take a lot.
So that's my point, is like PPL is going until it deflects.
Yeah.
So they're making the paddle deflect.
Yeah.
Where
yes.
USAP is just giving it a set number and seeing if it does or doesn't.
Yeah, correct.
And if it does, it fails. If it doesn't, it's good. So PPL is just forcing the paddle to fail.
Right.
And to force to a deflection point, and then if that number's too low, it fails.
Yeah. So they're just different. They're different methodologies of testing. So that's why, like, and I haven't even tried to explain this on a podcast because it's one of those things that, one, I don't even know how many people actually care about. And two, it's like just kind of confusing to explain, I feel like. But the long story short is the tests are clearly different. So when all these paddles have been failing this last year, it's not really been fair because you didn't know how to design around it. Yeah. And to my knowledge, companies weren't being presented that information very clearly.
Yeah.
So it seemed like there was a lack of transparency in terms of that. And so I think, in Selkirk's letter, that was like a big complaint, was that test. They were like, we'll get to some of that, but hey, we've been in these rooms when this test is being done, like we can't get clear answers on it. Their machines aren't calibrated properly, blah, 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 blah. Like there's a list of complaints throughout this letter.
Yeah.
And I mean, basically throughout this letter, they're basically like, these people are incompetent. They're idiots. They don't know what they're doing. Like they're blunt.
Yeah.
Throughout this whole thing. Like they're not very nice about it.
They're not holding back any punches, which, I mean, it's about time somebody went through,
For sure. All right, next thing was Selkirk basically said in the letter, like, hey, look, you blindsided us with this interim certification.
Oh, dude.
Like, we didn't know this was coming. And of course, the first one you approve is a Joola.
Is a Joola paddle.
Like, the one that was in trouble. And I have some interesting thoughts about this. I can't remember where I put this note in here. But basically, they were claiming in the letter they didn't even know what the testing standards were until the 3S was announced,
already released,
and UPA certified. So it's like, okay, all these manufacturers didn't know what was going on, but clearly Joola must have known what was going on to build a paddle to that specification
for a while. Yeah,
I mean, who knows for a while? Probably. I mean, they would have had to build up their stock, and I mean, who knows? But yeah, probably something like that. Clearly, the other manufacturers didn't know, which is problematic.
Yep.
I mean, how are you supposed to build for it if you don't know?
Yeah.
And second, well, I keep saying, let me wait to get. There's so many things to cover in this thing.
I know it's hard not to bounce back and forth because there's just so much to talk about, and they all tie together.
Right. In the letter, Selkirk was told, like, they basically asked, like, why did you push this through so fast and without
anyone getting to know?
Yeah, and I guess the response was, and I don't know this for sure because I don't have an email.
Allegedly, this is the response.
Yeah, allegedly the response was Joola was in a tight situation or tight spot with USAP and needed help getting their paddles approved. If that was actually said somewhere, that's crazy.
I would like to know who contacted who for that. If Joola's like, hey, we need to get this through because we need help, or if UPA was like, hey, we can help you out.
Well, probably a mix of both. My guess is that Joola obviously needs a paddle. Their pros need a paddle because the Gen 3 was gone. They've been playing with these mods. So obviously their players neneeded something because if they weren't super happy with the mod or whatever, they needed something. So my guess it was...
Gen 2s?
Well, true. Yeah. I mean, that's a good point. My guess is that it was, hey, what are these standards going to be? We want to build a paddle for it so we can have something to the market. They were clearly mad that, like, no one had the certification information. Joola comes out and, seemingly I imagine everyone thinks, like, you just reapproved the Gen 3 is probably what people think. We don't know that yet. We're going to find out when we cut one open. But understandably, I could see why they would probably think that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the other thing I'm really curious about, I don't even really understand what the point of the interim certification period was because this is supposed to be just a small period of time till all the rules get in place. And to me, it feels like literally just built for Joola.
Yeah.
Because if the pros are still allowed to play with USAP approved paddles, like they are now, Selkirk paddles, whatever paddles that aren't these new Joolas, why would you pay for the dual certification? You wouldn't pay for it because right now, apparently what the pricing is like $72,000 a year or $6,000 a month, $5,000 per paddle, I believe, and then I think it was $1,000 per similarity testing. Anyway, somewhere in that ballpark of pricing, basically $100,000 a year. If you have to approve this many paddles, it's going to be over $100,000.
Essentially comes out to be
or more,
or yeah, exactly, or more.
If you have a Joola catalog, it's going to be more. Okay, why, if I'm Selkirk, would I ever pay you over $100,000? I wouldn't, because my paddles work.
Yeah, exactly.
Until 2025.
Right.
So to me, the interim certification just didn't make sense. It seemed like if you're looking from the outside, that seems like you're just doing it to bail Joola out.
It's designed just for Joola, is how it feels. Which, again, would make sense if no one else was even notified of the testing procedures for the interim certification.
Yeah.
Except for Joola.
Yeah, so that's just kind of messy. And then, like I said earlier, Selkirk did go on to claim, like, the engineers didn't know they could calibrate their roughness tester, and then for their deflection machine, there's like a tear button, or you tear the extra weight out. Like if you're weighing
like a scale,
and you have a container, you don't want the weight of the container.
You tear it so it goes back to zero. You zero it out.
Exactly. And apparently they sometimes do that for their deflection test and sometimes don't.
Their quote was, sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. Yeah. Allegedly.
So and then to me, that's crazy.
Exactly. And then also their response to how often do you calibrate the stair was, you can calibrate this thing?
Even I know you can calibrate
Dude,
that
that's
thing.
what I'm saying. I'm like, I feel like we all kind of already knew this, but PPL's incompetency is unreal. And based on what I've heard in this letter saying that they have zero actual engineering background and they're former suit salesman.
Yeah, I don't know. That's crazy if that's true. But I mean, I've, again, heard a lot of complaints over the last year.
I wouldn't be surprised.
But one thing I want to go on to next is at one point, Selkirk did basically kind of go to bat for the smaller companies. And I thought this was really impressive because as I think companies like Selkirk, like Vulcan, like, any of these, Franklin, all these big companies, especially when the committee was announced, it was like, oh, of course you put all the big brands on there and you don't put any small brands on there. Yep. Like, it's just going to be a monopoly of the biggest guys trying to push out the smallest guys. Now, I have almost no doubt in my mind that some of these big companies don't want these small guys to exist.
100%.
It definitely hurts their sales.
100%.
But I was pretty impressed with this section of the letter from Selkirk, which was, the price of interim certification is, in our opinion, astronomical and unnecessary, and we assume non-interim certification pricing will be even higher. This will have two effects. One, push out new and smaller competition, and two, increase the price of paddles, especially from smaller competitors. Although Selkirk could absorb these costs without increasing price and it would benefit us to push out the competition, this does not align with our values. We believe competition makes us better and it is good for the consumer. A nonprofit will be able to execute certification at a significantly lower cost and without the concern of certification being leveraged to create a cash cow. And I was like, that's a pretty big thing to say.
I was very impressed with that. I gained a lot of respect for Selkirk by them saying that.
Because, you think they want $100 Vatic prisms on the market? You think they want these Monarchs at these cheaper prices that perform Selkirk has literally gotten ragged for the last, I would say, year and a half on expensive paddles, paint grit, blah, blah, blah. You guys aren't keeping up. There's paddles that are cheaper that perform better. Mm-hmm. So for them to even say this is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just feel like I gained respect for that for sure.
No, same. I definitely think it's, I can guarantee that a lot of these big companies would rather, Honolulu or 11624, some of these more Vatic, Spartus, than just to not exist. Yeah, because they're eating up a lot of the market.
Totally. There's two letters, and they both cover different things. But in a second letter, they also talked about this again, a similar thing. So I'm just going to read that really quick. I rarely take this tone, but we are very passionate about these things. The decisions being made are not just bureaucratic or administrative. They have real, tangible impacts on the lives and livelihoods of manufacturers, pros, and the broader pickleball community. These changes should not be quietly pushed through with a read my blog or check social media approach. I've spoken with brands outside of this so-called committee, and they had absolutely no idea what was going on. This exclusionary practice is not only unfair, but also detrimental to the sport's development, particularly for smaller brands that are just trying to compete on a level playing field. So I just feel like Selkirk could have went along with all of this and said, hey, we're in a good spot. We got the money. These guys are going to get screwed, and we'll be one of the, top 10 brands that dominate the market. Now we've gotten rid of all these guys. And
my big thing with this is like, it's important in my eyes to have big brands and small brands, right? Like, even if for pickleball, these small brands make equipment like the Prism, for example, that performs clearly phenomenally and is just as good as, $250, $300 paddles. I think it's important for like new people getting into pickleball. If there's only big brands and Joola's cheapest paddle or Selkirk's cheapest paddle is like $150 or whatever, and there's no other options, like, it's just bad for the growth of pickleball.
Yeah.
Like, if all these companies have to raise their prices to, compensate for this fee, this $100,000 fee, it's ridiculous. The price of these paddles are gonna go up. I mean, Selkirk even said like they can absorb it and not have any issues, but this will either bankrupt and kill off small companies, or they're just gonna have to raise prices, and then why buy any of those small brands, which will then end up killing them off anyways.
Totally. So I just thought that was a pretty stand-up thing for Selkirk to say. I don't feel like they necessarily had to do that, and I think they're saying what a lot of us have been thinking and saying, the last 6 months as some of this has been going on. So thought that was pretty good. Let me see here. Let me pull up. They, at the end of their letter, I'm going to go down here. This, again, guys, if we're able to link this down in the description, we will. It is absolutely massive, so feel free to read through it if it is there. But basically, at the end, they say to UPA, like, look, if you guys don't make these changes, like, we're not going to consider you guys like a legit governing body unless you make these adjustments. Like, this is what we want to see.
Yep.
And so this is gonna take a minute to read. But first, restructure PPL. PPL is not an engineering-based organization. They are unable to competently provide certification for paddles. PPL must, 1, be replaced with a new engineering-based organization, or at a minimum, Gary Brody must immediately step down and new engineering skilled leadership be put in place. We haven't talked about this much, but Gary Brody is like the head of PPL testing, and there's a lot that they say in the letter about that we're not going to back up and say, but that's really all you need to know about who Gary is. Selkirk does not like Gary. That's really all you got to know. Just look
into it on the email yourself.
Yeah. PPL must become a nonprofit organization, or at a minimum, we must receive guarantees and affidavits that the PPL is independent and does not share ownership or profit-sharing arrangements with the PPA and MLP and or PPA/MLP owners. There must be no conflicts of interest. Very good. I mean, I think we all agree with that.
We didn't even really get into that much yet, where there's conflict of interest everywhere in all of this right now. It's insane.
In other podcasts, I don't know if you were on those ones, but like definitely talked about that before. But like the whole them being their own governing body is a conflict of interest.
Exactly. One big thing though, now that the email highlights that if this is true, I mean, it's definitely very frustrating. UPA supposed to be a nonprofit organization from the get-go. They said they were gonna.
Yeah.
And they're not.
Well,
they said they're going to be eventually, but we can't do it now, and we need to like get our feet running, blah blah blah, all this stuff.
Yeah.
No, I feel like they need to be a nonprofit from the get-go, like they said they were gonna.
I think in an interview with Jason on Travis's podcast, they said like they were aiming for end of 2025, which to me I'm like,
so basically 2026.
A year, that's a while.
That's a while.
A lot can change in a year.
I was gonna say a lot can change, and we'll see if you actually hold up to that.
Yep.
And then also, Jason Aspis himself, if he still has any stake or profit from
we'll
the
get
kitchen.
to that.
Okay,
that's
you're waiting for that. Okay.
Well, I'm just gonna go through their whole list.
Okay, got it.
Next one, UPA-A and or the certification body of UPA-A must be converted to a nonprofit. Yeah, I mean, they basically just say what we just said, which is they want a nonprofit. That makes sense. And then their next thing was reducing the certification price, which that was the section I just read a minute ago. And then this is the part for Jason. Jason Aspis must remove all conflicts of interest if they exist. Jason Aspis must remove financial interest in the kitchen pickleball, which receives payments from paddle manufacturers, including Joola. Furthermore, Jason must sign an affidavit that he has no financial interest or personal gain from direct or indirect means with paddle manufacturers. Note, Selkirk is in a contractual relationship with the Kitchen Pickleball as well. This contract started before the formation of UPA-A and appointment of Jason. If Jason still has financial interest in the Kitchen Pickleball, we will not renew our contract to avoid any appearance of conflict of interest. Makes sense. Next up, they just talk about they want the interim certification to go through this audit that Tom Barnes was talking about. Basically, it's just a bunch of testing procedures that they want audited. Makes sense. Don't need to read that. And then there's option number 2. So that was option number 1. All of those things they want to see happen. Option number 2 is return paddle certification to USA Pickleball. USAP's improvement in testing and enforcement. USAP has actively been improving their testing protocols and are beginning to build more trust in providing objective standards that reflect real-world results and enforcing standards. Our biggest concerns with USAP prior were 1, their testing protocols not matching real-world results for power and spin. 2, their inaction to enforce standards on bad faith actors who were submitting paddles for approval that met specs and then producing different paddles out of spec to sell on the open market. And 3, their lack of transparency and consistent communication to manufacturers and lack of taking feedback. However, we have seen improvements in all of these areas, though work still needs to be done. Which, yes, they're clearly starting to step it up, and they're starting to post more about their stuff on like Instagram, how their test works. There were several people who didn't even know until USAP posted that they do a friction test, and I was like, yeah, that's always existed, and people thought it was brand new.
Yeah.
So they're getting better. However, still would like to see more transparency. Now, maybe they're being more transparent to the manufacturers than obviously the public, but like the mod, same thing as the Gen 3. So why is it on the market? Like, I would love to know
what happened internally with that.
Yeah, what happened there? Like, can we get some answers on this? Like, that would be great. So, yes, I do think they're improving, but I feel like Selkirk in this instance is like so upset with UPA, understandably so, that they're almost overlooking that USAP still has a ways to go.
Like, we've got a better of two evils here. Which
well,
one?
I mean, I would so much rather USAP. At least they're independent.
Exactly.
Like, if you had to pick, it's not even close.
Yeah.
But they still need to do a better job, in my opinion.
I do think there's a lot of work that needs to be done. They do need to tighten things up, just essentially be better.
Yeah.
But it's way better than we got going on with UPA. I would much rather stick with USAP and just try to hold them to being better.
Yep. And then they just talk about nonprofit status again in option 2. They said, at this juncture, we believe it is a non-negotiable that any certification organization must be a nonprofit. We believe there's too much room and temptation for conflicts of interest, anti-consumer behavior, and anti-competitive behavior with a for-profit certification organization. Yep. And then the letter ends. But again, guys, like I'm telling you, this thing is absolutely massive.
And there's two of them.
There's two of them.
One email is 4 pages long. That was the first one, the main one. And then the second one is 10 pages long.
Yeah. And they, in the second one, basically, they kind of go over why they don't like PPL. They recall a bunch of different events that Selkirk was present at and issues they had with testing. Basically, they just go in depth on like, here's why we don't like PPL testing. We've been telling you this for a while. You guys have continued to ignore us. The problems are still happening. There's conflicts of interest all over the place. Like, you guys need to get this under control. This is bad.
And they're still just being ignored.
Well, I don't know if they're still being ignored after this letter. Who knows what type of communication's happening. But to me, one, there's always two sides to every story. While I think at this point we've all been concerned about conflicts of interest, a for-profit organization certifying paddles that has been known to be very money hungry. Like, I would be very curious to know what PPA's defense to all of this is, because especially in terms of the engineering side of things, it sounds pretty inexcusable that there's been problems, and
that's really inexcusable. I think just if it's true that PPL has, again, zero engineering background, they clearly don't know how to even work these testing devices, which is just pitiful.
Yeah,
there's no excuse. I would love to know. I mean, just picking up these people off the street and say, hey, you want a job?
Yeah.
You know, like, I mean, it's just sad.
Yeah, so that's kind of crazy, but I'm definitely curious what their side is. But to me, at the end of the day, the actions are always going to speak louder than words. And at least the last few months, it's been a whole lot of words from UPA and not a whole lot of action. Or even when action has clearly been taken, like this interim certification, it wasn't done very well.
Or what frustrates me is when the pricing for the testing was initially leaked at being $100,000.
Yeah.
And then Jason and UPA was like, whoa, that's never been confirmed, and we're not doing that, and that's blown way out of proportion, and blah, blah, blah. Oh, but it's going to be $72,000 and $5,000 per paddle, and blah, 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 and it's going to essentially be $100,000.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. That's pretty bad. That's pretty bad.
Like, that's just messed up.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty bad to me. I'm like, you guys can't say, hey, that was like never going to happen. That was never meant to happen. And then basically, I mean, that comes out to more than $100K.
Yeah, oh yeah, it can for sure. Especially with some of these companies, with how often they're getting paddles approved and tested and whatnot. Like that could be close to $125,000.
I mean, it could be even more. Who knows?
Exactly. So it's like, again, you said it. Actions speak louder than words, and so far their actions have not been great.
So I think what it's going to come down to, the real breaking point, in my opinion, for UPA is going to be, what is this 3S? Mm-hmm. What is inside of it? How is it made? And how hard does it actually hit?
Yep.
Because if all this talk has been about, we have like all these amazing engineers, like the University of Massachusetts is now starting to do building these tests separate from PPL. So if we're using their tests now for this 3S and it's still super hot and people are still complaining about it and blah, 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 to me, that's like one of the final nails in the coffin.
100%.
Like, of all the things to come in and mess up, it would be to not mess up this Joola reapproval.
Yeah.
If they got something reapproved at like the speed of a paddle tech, fine, cool.
Sure.
You actually, like, that would mean you did the right thing. You did a good job. And we're happy about that. So I just think a lot of it's going to hinge on the 3S.
I'm also curious to know, do we know how it's going to work with currently USAP approved paddles? Are they just going to grandfather it in? Do those have to go through the UPA testing to be approved for UPA?
For what, in 2025?
Yeah, like all of the all of these current
They would have
paddles.
to pass all their tests.
They would all have to go through the testing.
Yeah. Because they can't just trust that.
USAP was...
Yeah, that it was... Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I figured, but I just wasn't sure if it was listed somewhere.
Yeah, no, I mean, they will definitely have to go through. So I think a lot of it's going to hinge on that 3S, and then just we'll see what future actions actually lead to.
Imagine the 3S and let's just say the mod also gets UPA approved, but then like the gearbox doesn't, and other crazy hot paddles don't, but the Joola they're all approved.
They've
shown favoritism with Joola already.
Yeah. What I think I'm the most curious about now, because I think there was another screenshot of like a response from what appears to be Vulcan, because it was like signed by Vulcan or had like a Vulcan thing. And basically they came out and said, hey, look, we agree with everything Selkirk said here. Like, we wholeheartedly agree with everything they said. What is UPA going to do if all the brands just say, you know what, like if all the top, let's say you took Selkirk, you took Vulcan, you took Franklin, you took Onix, you took whoever. You take anyone who's unhappy on that board,
yep,
and they all just say, we don't care. We're just going to go back over to USAP, have fun over here. Like, we're not going to sponsor your thing anymore. One, UPA and PPA loses probably a considerable amount of money. Mm-hmm. And two, what are they going to do? Just say, yeah, we're going to have like 2 paddle brands, and now none of the sponsored pros can play this tour? Like, oh, James Ignatowicz can't play with the Selkirk.
It's literally only going to be Joola pros. It's going to be the PPA Joola edition.
Yeah, to me, it feels like in this situation, the pickleball brands have a lot of power in where this could go. If they say, we're not going to go through with this, we're not going to get our paddles UPA approved, we don't want to sponsor your tour anymore, we're going to go over to like APP or USAP or whatever, what are they going to do?
Mm-hmm.
So true. To me, I feel like if the brands really don't want to see this, then they need to vote with their money.
Yeah.
Which is the same thing with consumers, which we're going to talk about a little bit in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I guess to end this, like, I just feel like the brands have the power and sway to make happen what they want to see happen.
Yeah, I mean, if every other brand agrees with, if they all see this email and go, we agree with Selkirk, what's stopping them from all just banding together and being like, we're not dealing with this.
Yeah.
You know? Like, what are they going to do? It's going to be UPA and Joola against the world, you know?
And maybe there's another brand or two that agree too, but even if you take out the majority of them, like, what are they going to do?
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't know. Again, we'll see if more things unfold. I always feel like I feel like the way I was raised was just there's always two sides to every story, but
totally.
So far, UPA's side of the story does not look good given how Selkirk tells.
Given how what Selkirk's been saying and what we've seen in the past with UPA, it's not their history. Does not make this look good. It also just makes things add up.
Yeah.
So, dude, it's crazy.
That's a lot. Again, that may be linked down in the description. Pickleball Tech Dude also recaps a lot of it. Anyways, the kitchen.
Yeah.
Made it to the kitchen. Kind of continuing the same topic.
Mm-hmm.
I basically wanted to go over who is really at fault for all the hot paddles. Because I feel like what has happened to the market is a combination of companies found ways to work around the current tests because the tests weren't good enough, but the companies were also giving people what they asked for. So let me recap how some of this has gone in my mind. Thermoforming comes out.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone wants a thermoform paddle. It hits harder. It's getting more spin. Like, everything about the paddle is basically just better. Thermoforming blows up. For the first couple months, the first 4 brands that did it, completely out of stock. As other brands introduced it, hard to get. People loved the power. Okay? Then Gearbox comes out later in the year. Paddle sells like crazy. It's super hot. It does things that you've probably not seen a pickleball paddle do unless it was core crushed. And it was like, wow, this is insane. Like, this is a huge...
And that was right after we figured out what core crushing was.
Yeah.
Like, we realized, they're not just insane cannons. They're actually broken.
Yes. So then Gearbox comes out with one and, doesn't have those problems, seemingly. And then at that point, with how well the Gearbox did, I think that review has over 100,000 views or really close.
Yeah.
And those Gearboxes were everywhere.
And immediately after, literally... every tournament, everyone had a Gearbox. When we went to Nationals in Dallas, dude, you could not look. Every other court had at least one.
Yeah.
It was insane.
Yeah. Gearbox was everywhere. So at that point, if you're a paddle company and you're thinking about what's my next paddle going to be, and you're hearing everyone say, power, 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 I want power, I want power. We love these power paddles. The Gearbox sold really well. What is your first reaction going to be as a company? You want to give the market what they want. Mm-hmm. So you're hearing everyone say power, 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 and you're like, okay, I got to figure out how to make a power paddle.
Yep.
Maybe I got to work around this test, but it's still legal, even though we worked around it. The governing body decided it's fine. So then Joola comes out, and the paddles are super hot, and the other problem is that they were breaking. But then this is when everyone, I feel like, hit the tipping point of these paddles are stupid. Mm-hmm. The pros start complaining, amateurs start complaining, everyone's mad. So Joola has the biggest launch in probably pickleball history. So the consumer clearly says, I want power. So to me, I'm like, if people really didn't want these power paddles, then stop buying them.
Exactly. Well, see, it's interesting because the Gearbox was around for a while before the Joolas came out.
Yeah.
But yes, there was a bit of a fuss, but not industry wide. Yeah. It only became a big issue once the pros had to start dealing with the power. Yeah. And then once the pros were like, can't deal with this anymore, it's dangerous, got to wear eye protection and this and that. Because there was maybe 2 people playing with the Gearbox at the time.
Yeah.
Hayworth used it at Nationals, and then Stone?
No, he never used one. But
there's somebody else, I swear.
Roman used one a couple times. The pros knew the Gearbox was hot, but they didn't have to play against it.
They didn't have to deal with it, exactly. But then once Joola came out with theirs, now the pros got to deal with it. Pros are professional complainers, and it became an industry-wide problem. And then now amateurs are also dealing with it. So it wasn't really an issue until Joola came out with theirs, which is interesting.
Yeah, I just think what's interesting about this is it's and this is why when people say right now, hey, let's cap power, but just unleash spin. Uncap it. Don't even put a limit on it. I think that is equally as bad of an idea because I think we just saw that happen with power. Everyone 100. Said power, more power, more power, more power. And it's okay, well, clearly we've passed a threshold of what we think is an acceptable amount of power. And while people think, hey, the most amount of spin will just make the game more athletic, it'll make it more entertaining, it will probably also, just like power, ruin certain aspects of the game that we really
100%.
Like. So I don't think you can just uncap things and have it be good. There always needs to be a limit.
Mm-hmm.
Like if we just had pure rubber, it'd be crazy.
Dude, we've done that. We've tested that.
Yeah.
Remember we took a fresh sheet of table tennis rubber and glued it to a paddle. Not only did that thing have insane power, the spin on that paddle was absurd.
Yeah,
you could do things that no one has ever seen done to a pickleball.
Yeah.
It will break the game. People do not realize what unleashing spin would actually do.
Yeah. So I don't think that's good for the game. And I just feel like the hot paddle problem, while yes, spurred on by the companies like pushing the boundary, was also what people were asking for. Mm-hmm. So I feel like we got what we asked for and now realized, hey, we don't actually want this.
Yeah.
So
I mean, but I also don't blame any of these companies because, like,
that's what I'm saying.
All these companies want to make money.
Yeah, they want to make money, and they gave people what they wanted.
Right.
But then the people realized that isn't actually what we wanted. This is less fun now.
Yeah, should take a poll because I'm curious, like, what the numbers of people would actually be of like, I still like playing with a power paddle and a Joola because there's still those people out there versus how many people are like, no, I don't like this. This shouldn't exist.
I also feel like it's tricky because you probably have a mix of people who don't like it but would still use one. Just like the pros, right? Exactly. Like the Joola pros aren't going to not use it.
Right.
It gives them an advantage and they are currently allowed to use it. So why would you not use it?
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's a lot of amateurs in that same boat. But I just feel like, again, similar to the pickleball brands at UPA, you need to vote with your wallet. Mm-hmm. If you want power paddles out of the game, you got to stop using them.
I'm curious, what's your thought on this? And this has been said on other podcasts. I think Travis has been pretty vocal about this. No, sorry, not Travis. Zane. Where if your 65-year-old Susan doesn't really hit the ball very hard, but a poppier, harder hitting Joola allows you to be a little bit more competitive in the game, where does that fall into play with you? Do you think it still shouldn't exist? And sorry, Susan, you got to just deal with Gen 2 paddles? Or do you think that's a valid reason to still have them around?
Well, here's my thought. It depends. If it's legal, tough luck, everyone. It's legal. Like the mod currently. Yeah. It's legal. If you don't like it, tough luck. Unfortunately, it's approved and people can use it. So you can't really complain about it.
Yep. But
Zane's whole point about like, okay, look, it's not making this person dangerous. It's just evening the playing field for them.
Yep.
You know, a 65-year-old versus like a 20-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
It makes the game even. That doesn't personally bother me, but it is a really great line, right? Like, okay, cool. It helps the 65-year-old, but now what if I put that paddle in a 20-year-old's hand? It's now less fun for everyone.
Yeah.
So it doesn't bother me when it equalizes the playing field, but when it feels like it gives a huge advantage to someone, like if Amrik holds a Joola, like the game is scary.
Dude.
I do not like playing. For those who don't know, Amrik's one of our local pros, hits the absolute crap out of the ball. It's like one of the only times where I'm like, I just don't want to play because like this is absolutely not fun.
I mean, I got a slight insight of what that was like in Kansas City when we handed the mod to that one pro.
Yeah.
I was like, if this is what I would have to deal with, no, I ain't getting on that court. No way.
Yeah.
Dude, nuh-uh.
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, I'll pass.
So, yeah, I don't know. I get Zane's take there. Like, here's the thing. If I show up at a rec park and a 65-year-old has a Vice and they're not just like hidden missiles, I don't care because it doesn't hurt me. It's just like the serve rules. People don't usually complain about someone's like illegal serve if it's not benefiting them.
Yeah.
But if their illegal serve is acing them, then they're going to complain.
See, yeah, it's interesting. I kind of disagree with Zane's take on it about evening the playing field. Like, I'm with you where if it's legal, sure, whatever, tough luck, we all got to deal with it. But, like, for example, Vice, see, it's just so tricky because, like, I don't care about playing again. Rec means nothing to me.
Yeah.
But if it's anything tournament related, like, let's just say the mod is banned for pros, but they're still letting people and amateurs use it.
Yeah.
I would be so annoyed if I had to play against that. If I go to a PPA and I'm playing against, you know, every other court, every other team has a mod. I'd be really annoyed with that.
Right.
It's just such a, I don't know. It leads into like what I was going to say or coming up. Do you think power paddles and paddles this hot are like dangerous for the growth of pickleball?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think at this point, most people would universally agree that it's not going to help the game. Because when this game has been doing great before these insane power paddles, no one picked up a pickleball paddle and said, you know what? If I could hit the ball harder, this game would be a lot more fun. This game would be way more fun if I could just slap the ball like a Joola Gen 3 could, or a Gearbox or whatever.
That's fair.
So I don't think having less powerful paddles hurt the game. You know, maybe now if we were talking it's significantly nerfed, like we're talking slower or less powerful than a Gen 1 and you're playing with a Franklin ball. But even then, like, I don't think the reason people fall in love with this game is not because they can hit the ball so hard. I think they like it because it is stripped back in certain ways, and it like the game feels more neutral for more people.
I feel like it's evens the playing field more if no one can hit the ball absurdly hard.
Yeah.
Like, why?
I mean, someone's always still going to be able to hit it harder,
of course,
like physical strength, like James Ignatowicz,
exactly.
blah, blah, blah.
There's always going to be people who are, but I think that's a good thing. I mean, look at baseball. You know, there's going to be certain people who can hit further and harder than others. They're all using wood bats.
Yeah.
I don't think we need to do that. Like, we need everyone to use the same equipment and strip it down to bare bones and whatnot. But I also don't think that we should allow someone to just be better by giving them a certain paddle.
Yeah, right.
I think that it strips away the actual skills and development of a player by just giving them a crazy paddle. And I think I would rather see somebody show off how good they are and be able to do certain things with a paddle than say, oh, I can do this because of the paddle.
I mean, it almost reminds me of like when the spin serve was around.
Yeah.
Like people didn't want it because it was like, well, if they just master this insane spin serve, like what am I going to do
But
about
I would rather have that. I would rather have people be able to get really good at a spin serve because that's a skill of theirs than be like, oh, I have a Gen 3. I can just hit this as hard as I can and ace you. Imagine James Ignatowicz with the mod.
I wouldn't even want to know what his serve would look like with a mod.
After ace after ace after ace. And it would be because, I mean, he still obviously has a hard serve without it, but it would only make him better and improve his serve.
Yeah.
Versus, oh, I just took hundreds of hours practicing something and improving myself as a player.
Yeah.
That I think is better than, I would rather have that than paddles. Because like, look at tennis. We're not banning the kick serve because players are getting too good at hitting a kick serve.
Yeah, right.
That would be ridiculous.
Right.
You know? So I would much rather have physical improvements over technology improvements.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it needs to be capped, and I hope it gets figured out here soon. Because I mean, the whole industry is like a wreck. Like, if you want to buy a paddle, and let's say it has like a foam core design, you're like, well, is that going to get delisted? Is it going to break?
Everyone's scared to buy paddles.
Yeah, I mean, it's just whole industry is a mess with paddles. I feel like if power was capped somewhere around like a Paddle Tech, like the new ones, I'd probably be pretty okay with that. Like Paddle Tech is hot, and in the right hand is going to be pretty insane, but it's not unwieldy.
It's not like super scary.
Yeah.
You know, where from what I've seen with certain players with this mod, it's genuinely just scary.
Or even the Gearbox.
Or the Gearbox. And it's just not fun.
Yeah.
When you have to like debate before they even swing, am I going to dodge? Am I going to try to hit it? Like, you don't even physically have time to decide after they hit the ball.
So the little tournament that I did this weekend that you watched, did you see the one guy, his forehand?
Oh, yeah.
Can you imagine that guy with a Gearbox or a mod?
Dude,
his forehand
insane.
Was terrifying. He, with a mod or a Joola, would have been ungodly.
Not terrifying only because of how hard it is hit, but just because, dude, it was the biggest swing from anywhere on the court I've ever seen, and it was just so uncontrolled. You had no clue where that ball was going. If a player is like that, just massive backswing, kitchen line, mid-court, anywhere on the court. Look, I hate wearing protective eyewear, but at that point, I would have to because you have no clue where that ball is going. Like that, I just don't. I don't like that.
I think if paddles, like if you play with something that hot, it would just, it would be insane. Like
it's just dangerous.
Totally. Also, what's interesting about, so people are mad at like Gearbox and like Joola for working around the current tests or whatever. I didn't see anyone complaining about Pro XR working around the grit rules.
It's true.
So if you guys aren't familiar with this, like Pro XR's grit, like everyone's like, oh wow, it's like always so gritty, it gets a ton of spin. Like my understanding of how their texture worked and man, they're going to have to go into a lot of technical stuff for this. The long story short is the paddles were really gritty in one axis, but they weren't very gritty in another axis that wasn't as important for how you strike the ball. So it was really gritty in the axis that you strike the ball from, but not gritty in the other direction. And the current way the test worked is you averaged the grit all over the face.
In all the directions.
In all the different directions, and then whatever the average spit out had to be below a certain number.
So one number is going to be really high in the axis that you're hitting.
Yep.
The other is going to be really low.
So it pulls the average down.
Exactly, right in the middle, and then it passes.
I didn't see anyone complaining about that.
But the only reason why is because it wasn't like, it was good spin, but it wasn't game breaking.
Right.
If it was game breaking spin, like you had rubber and you could just hit as hard as you wanted, and it'd be the ball would dip over the net and hit the kitchen.
Yeah.
Then people would be complaining.
My whole point is just that if we're going to complain about it for these other ones, we got to be consistent.
Yeah.
We got to complain about it for everyone.
I agree. And that one's just, I feel like that one's just tough though. I mean, because that one wasn't exactly like public knowledge. Not everyone really knew how that worked, but everyone knows that a paddle hits way too hard.
Yeah, for sure.
So that one's tricky because I just got a gritty paddle versus this one's not very gritty, So there's too much variance in that, but there's no variance in how hard a paddle's hitting.
Totally. Okay, well, last thing we'll go over real quick here. This is probably going to be much less exciting, but just want to talk about the PPA this last weekend. I guess we could have talked about this up front, but so they were indoors, looks like a convention center or something like that.
Kind of like what PickleCon was like.
Yeah, exactly. And they just had pickle rolls everywhere. Now granted, we haven't had a venue specifically built for pickleball yet. Mm-hmm. So maybe when we have a really nice indoor dedicated built for it, it'll be different. But streaming pickleball indoor just doesn't, when I watch it, I'm like, I just feel like this should be outside.
Yes.
Even though
it's always better outside.
We don't want the elements, like the wind obviously impacts the ball a lot, the heat, the cold, blah, blah, blah.
Rain.
All of that, those things are super annoying, and we'd rather be indoor for that. But when I watch, I'm just like, this looks cheap.
I have not once seen a single indoor stream look good or look professional.
Yeah.
Look at the NBA or other professional. Obviously, there's millions and millions more dollars in there. But it's a high level professional broadcast where I watch the PPA, and if you look at grandstand stream, dude, I could do a better job with my iPhone.
Yeah.
Pull up Instagram and you have a better live stream. I mean, it's just sad.
Yeah.
So I haven't seen a single indoor stream that actually looks professional.
And I mean, some of that I don't even think is necessarily, I mean, in terms of I'm looking at one image here, just how it's decorated, I don't know, it just looks kind of cheap with the barriers and
cheesy.
All the stuff. I don't know, it just doesn't look right. Mm-hmm. But
and just we'll probably pop this image up on screen so you guys can see. There's these flimsy barriers all around the court. There's just open concrete all over again, like a convention center, and people are just walking by willy-nilly wherever they want to go. How is that? I would have to be so frustrated if I was a pro player. I mean, we've seen Jack Sock get annoyed with fans getting up and kind of walking while they're playing. If there's just anyone walking in any direction all over the place, I'm sure there's players who aren't a fan of that. Yeah,
I don't know. To me, it just, and now look, I understand there's not a ton they can do about this, right? What are you going to do? Completely revamp an entire convention center to be the perfect pickleball facility? Look, there's limitations to it. There's only so much they can do.
Right.
And most of me bringing this up wasn't even to complain oh, the PPA made it look so bad this weekend or anything. The main reason I bring it up is unless we start spending millions and millions of dollars to make these indoor facilities just look incredible, I feel like the pickleball is just better outside.
Yeah, I agree.
As much as the elements suck, I just feel like for the broadcast, it just looks way, way better. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know. We'll see where it goes.
Well, and look at Championship Court. They tried to make it look nicer, bigger stands, what they usually do.
Yep.
But again, because it's Pickleroll, they just put, I don't know why they just didn't take more Pickleroll squares, because that's all they are, is they're little squares, and they just glue them down to the floor and extend.
Well, I don't think it's glued, it's rolled, right? It's a huge mat that's rolled out.
Oh, well, okay, I guess I don't know exactly for these ones specifically, but at PickleCon, the ones we were playing on were individual squares, like floor tiles that were put down next to each other. So I do believe like there's Pickleroll that is just like a big roll that's rolled out, and there's some that it's, I think that's what they are playing on, but some are just like squares that are laid down. But like they could have just taken those and made the court bigger, but instead they put black carpet.
Yeah, that was pretty bad.
Court.
In singles, it's in doubles. When I watched mixed, I never saw it be a problem. Like pros running off of it.
Yep.
But in singles, I definitely saw it a few times, and I was like, oh, that's got to be so frustrating.
Frustrating, potentially dangerous, slipping. I don't know how well it's glued down to the floor, if it is at all.
Yep.
But that's only championship court. If you pull up the grandstand live stream, there's not even these barriers. It just goes from Pickleroll to straight open concrete, and then right next to that is chairs. And I have a video clip of this.
There was no barriers?
No barriers, just folding chairs. There's like a little stand.
What? I'm going to have to go see that. I didn't see that.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
I'll show it to you. And then I can't remember what pro it was. They're playing singles, and he runs off the court to try and get a ball and literally falls into these chairs.
It's so bad.
Like open concrete, slippery, falling into chairs.
I'd be curious to see, because I've been seeing images get posted, next week's PPA in Vegas at the Fontainebleau or whatever.
Yeah.
Looks like they're trying to do some pretty big stuff for championship court. I'm curious to see what the contrast between the Salt Lake City one and this one is. Like, maybe this is the one that's going to prove me wrong, but I just feel like doing Pickleroll over top of a existing surface is like not the way to do it, and is probably frustrating for the pros. Like,
has to be.
When we were at PickleCon and played on one, like there were definitely spots on the court with just terrible bounce. It just doesn't bounce.
It did not bounce at all. It was bad. I'm curious, with the hotel venue. I mean, we've been there. Very nice hotel. Yeah. I don't know where specifically in there it's going to be or how big it's going to be, but I mean, I don't know. It's Vegas. There's tons of money there, maybe. Yep. But it's PPA. They're going to be cheap. So I don't know. We'll wait and see. I'm curious. Maybe they'll make us eat our words like Jimmy Miller.
Yeah. We'll see. So I don't know. That's all I got.
Yeah. Well, real quick, I just have one really random thing that I have to shout out because I told him I would. So we did, me and a friend of mine the other day did a very random, goofy test that we were curious about. So a friend of mine, his name's Sam. We used to play baseball, and we're very competitive with each other. We have a Stalker radar gun. So we brought it and we wanted to see, because he did this test with a friend where he threw a pickleball from baseline to kitchen, and it is the scariest thing you've ever seen in your entire life. You cannot see that ball. Like he said, he did it with somebody and he hit him 3 times. He couldn't even get the paddle on it. So we wanted to see how fast he could actually throw the ball. And he beat me. He hit 99.8 miles an hour. Imagine if
Bro didn't even break 100 miles an hour.
I know, right? But can you imagine a pickleball coming at you 99 miles an hour?
I would not want to imagine that.
It's absolutely insane. So there's your shout out, Sam. I told you I'd do it. Couldn't hit 100. Disappointed.
Funny.
But anyways, you have anything else?
Nope, I'm good.
All right. Well, that was a lot, man.
Yeah, that was definitely a lot. So cool. Well,
Sweet.
We'll catch you guys next week.
Yeah, we'll catch you next week.
See ya.
Peace.